Today, I am speaking to the brilliant Laura Moniz De Aragao. Apologies for my absolute butchering of the Portuguese pronunciation. Previously a ballerina, Laura has an incredible career in tech sales, working at companies such as Darwin, Nudge, and is now the RVP of Sales Global Strategic Accounts at BetterUp. She is also the new mum of two and recently returned to work after a year of maternity leave. Laura is the epitome that women don't need to choose between a career or motherhood. You can do it both. Today, we discuss thriving after maternity leave, and she walks us through the skills that she has developed from being a mother, which is persistence, prioritization, and patience. We cover what businesses can do to help mothers return to work more smoothly, ways to tackle that feeling of imposter on return, and what good maternity policy looks like. She says, it's not just about offering policies, it's about fostering a culture where new parents feel supported, seen, and valued. Laura is such an inspiration and clearly an incredible mother, so I can't wait for you all to learn something from today's episode. Hi everyone, welcome to the next episode of Sales Unfiltered. Today I am so excited to be joined by Laura Moniz De Aragao. We are chatting today about thriving after maternity leave, and I think a congratulations is offered. So
thank you.
You've got two little kids now?
I've got two, yes, we're a busy household of two. I've got Allegra who's almost 4 and Raphael who's now just over 1.
Oh,
so
amazing.
Yeah.
Busy life.
Busy life.
Any
busy
more
life.
on the cards?
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. So, if that does happen, then it's not planned. You heard it here. Yeah, no, not planned.
She's done.
Yeah.
You wrote an amazing piece for our Sales Unfiltered blog about thriving after maternity because, I'm so excited to talk to you because people often think you've got to choose career or being a mother, and you are the walking living proof that you can do both. It's superheroes don't exist, but they kind of do with mothers. So in this piece, and I just wanted to read a little excerpt from it. If you haven't read it already, I'll pop it in the show notes. But you said, remember the days are long, but the years are short. They won't always wake up for cuddles throughout the night, and one day you'll miss having a mucky face to wipe. So cherish every cuddle and remember them all, because one day they won't be this small. Which, by the way, are you a poet? When I was reading this out last night, I was like, that all rhymes.
I might have had some help.
But it is a stark reminder of how precious time is, and you can make more money, you can make more businesses, you can make more memories, but you can never get back any time.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start this podcast by asking, what is one memory in time with your kids that you will cherish forever?
I don't think there's one. I think it's the lots of little memories that you gather up in your little memory box when... particularly when you're on maternity leave, you do get that ability to step away from the work hamster wheel and really, cherish the small things. So it's not like, most people say, it's the first walk that they took or their first smile. For me, it was more just the everyday being able to wake up, sit on the sofa, have my coffee quietly with, Lorraine in the background. How often as working professionals do you have to, do you get to watch Lorraine or Good Morning TV?
Great
and just
TV.
having my little one there and just being right, what should we do today? And it's just, I really cherish that time to really take on it almost like a different persona and a slower pace of life. And I think we don't get that ability a lot of the time in the sort of the busy working world that we're in these days.
It's almost what COVID gave us.
Exactly.
I know it was an awful time, but you take it for granted just to stop time and actually just be present.
Totally. And look, Enrique and I were very fortunate that with both of the businesses that we were at, and he was changing jobs at the time as well. So we actually got to, with Rafa in particular, our second, the one I've had most recently, we were both off at the same time for a period of almost 3-4 months overlapping. Wow. And so we really treasured that time to be able to travel and just, we said we were living our Made in Chelsea life. For those of you that watch Made in Chelsea or one of those shows, we were going down to a restaurant and drinking champagne on the Monday and being who even are we? And
what's happened?
Life is very different now, but it's those sorts of things that we were that was a really lovely time.
If you and Enrique were a Made in Chelsea character, who would you be?
Oh, do you know what? I'm too old for it now. This was something.
Back in the day,
it's like Spencer Matthews, Louise Thompson, the blonde.
I can see you as Binky.
Binky, I like, Yeah, I'm trying to think of the blonde one that's now escaped me. I'm the old school
The OG.
series. I'm the OG.
Great.
Now I just watch it and I feel old.
Yeah. No, the same.
So,
I still watch
it's-
it, and I still watch Love Island, and I'm like, I'm 30 years
Oh yeah,
old.
Love
I need to
Island.
grow
I do
up.
still watch Love Island. Yeah, that is my that is my guilty pleasure.
I love that you're watching Lorraine, not Peppa Pig yet, so that's nice.
Oh, I don't
you've
know.
got that to come.
No, Peppa Pig is on in our household. I mean, Allegra was still at nursery, right? So that's one of the decisions that we did make, is that we were financially able, fortunately, to keep Allegra in full-time nursery when we had Rafa. So we did get that sort of one-on time with him, which often with the second or third, it's you can't. And we made that conscious decision that no, we wanted to give him our sole attention. Allegra was thriving at nursery, but geez, yeah, weekends is Peppa Pig on repeat.
And it's awful. It's also, she's very aggressive. I don't like it. I'm like, she shouldn't be allowed to be the role model for kids.
Totally. Bluey
It's not
is much more of a well-rounded show when it comes to bringing up your children.
There you go.
That's the tip from me, is Bluey over Peppa Pig.
That's your handbook.
They love Peppa.
So, Laura, when thinking about women in business,
Yeah.
often people say, oh, why are you at work so late? Like, who's looking after your kids? Or it's always put on the female as the
Yeah.
person that needs to be that parent to their kids, to always be that constant. But then also at the same time, when men leave meetings and leave work to go tend to their kids, they're often asked like, oh, well, where's your wife? So how have you navigated, I guess, that talk, but also having Enrique, who's also in tech sales, like very successful in this industry as well? How are you balancing that?
So I think in some regards, I'd say we've got it easier, actually, in terms of our parenting dynamic and life dynamic, because from the get-go, we have been such equals in our career journeys, whether that be from I don't know, however you measure that, but whether it be seniority or earnings, is pretty much exactly equal. And
Power
so with
couple.
that, yeah, but it becomes a parity,
Yeah.
right? So there's complete parity in how we go about things. So, there's never ever been a question of, oh, Laura, you're going to be the one that has to take a backward step. That discussion was never even had. Now that comes with its own challenges, because we are both still driving towards, I guess, a further careered path. And so you do have to then think, how are we going to solve for the juggle and the struggle of the childcare, the bouts of nursery sickness that inevitably happens with children. Last week, Rafa was home from nursery for 3 days, and you do have to, it is a real juggle. But the one thing we've never had is this power trip or struggle of whose job is more important. That's never been a discussion in our household. But I think in some regard, in my opinion, the female sometimes has it easier, because to your point, rightly or wrongly, it almost is expected that it's the female that will take care of the sick child or leave to do the school pickup or whatever it is. But because we are so equal in the way that we divide and conquer, Enrique does do a lot of that. Today, he will be doing the nursery pickups. And I think there is still, unfortunately, in the workplace, a bit of the rolling of the eye when it is the male that is saying, hey, I've got to leave this meeting early to pick up my kids. Now, I hope that is changing, and I can see positives that it is changing in the right direction, but there's still so much more to do there, because sometimes I do think it is harder on the father in these circumstances, because it's the norm that the mum does this stuff.
Yeah. And also, I mean, we could do a whole episode on paternity, but
Yeah.
that is so important that businesses look at having a serious paternity package, because it's so impossible for the father to be able to bond with the kids if the woman's got all this time at home and then the father's literally back at work the next day.
Totally that. Yeah. And, fortunately, the companies that we've worked for have both sides have been very good with that. And actually, there were periods during this maternity leave that I took that I had to go to Austin, which is our HQ for leadership offsites and so on and so forth. And I'd be away actually back into the working world for a week, which I loved. I got to be sort of Laura, non-mum Laura for a week. But Enrique was able to take that time off without his employer even blinking. So I think it is one thing to ensure, if you are thinking of starting a family, it shouldn't be the decision criteria of when to start a family. I'd absolutely wouldn't advocate that base your decision on when to start a family based on the employer's provision of paternity and maternity policies, but it should be a factor in the, am I in the right place to support me through that journey?
There's such it's such a hard question to say when you're ready to have a family, because
I
mean, I even say that, I'm like, I am not ready to have kids, but I don't think you are ever ready. Like, did you feel ready when maybe you didn't plan to have the kids when you did have them, but what kind of conversations happened for the two of you to make sure that you were in that right place to start a family?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think, there's professional readiness and then there's your personal readiness. And my opinion is screw professional readiness. Like I hate it. I hear so many of close friends of mine say, yeah, there's just no way. Like, I really do want to start a family, but there's just no way with the job I'm doing right now I could do it. And being really honest, again, back to that perspective, this is a moment in time in your career. You will be able to go back up to whatever you were doing. Your career has different waves, but if you are personally ready and you as a family unit with you and your partner are personally ready and in a health position to start a family, that's the time to do it. I just can't advocate enough for don't put the professional lens and blur that with when you should start a family. I think for us, we got married quite young. We've been married almost 11 years now, crikey.
Wow.
So we got married relatively young, Enrique and I, and we decided, to really, back in the days where we were both AEs, maximize those sales commissions on lots of holidays, crazy cars, all that jazz. And we did that for, a good, 6-7 years before even thinking about kids, and we sort of got that out of our system. And I did know, we knew as a unit we were personally ready, and that's when we started trying, and then chaos occurs.
I love that. Ignore the professional ready. It has to be personal.
Because what happens if okay, I'm not professionally ready because I'm doing this job, but then a year later something happens to your health, which means you can't have, it's just not worth it. It isn't worth it. It's about, bringing a human into this world is so much more important, dare I say, than anything that your career will ever give you. It's the biggest thing you could be doing. And so don't let whatever job you're doing be the major factor as to when.
Yeah. Great advice. And BetterUp did give you an incredible maternity leave. So before we talk about how to thrive after maternity, could we get a bit of a lens into what they offered you, how they supported to make sure that you had those keep in touch days, but also you mentioned commission is a huge thing within sales, and often people think, what if I go on maternity and I only get this percentage of my base? How do I work that out?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to work for an organization which their entire philosophy is whole person development, right? To thrive, to perform at work, you have to thrive as an individual. So, philosophically, as a business, I knew that they were going to be a great employer when it came to things like this. And, it's beyond also just the, parental leave benefits. We offer, I think it's $20,000 to help people even if you need to have IVF and things like that. There are some amazing benefits that the company offers. But I think, what really helped is, first of all, the time. So the ability to take, in this instance with my last birth with Rafa, I decided to take the 12 months, which, you may say as a sales leader, wow, almost you get kudos points if you take a shorter time. And I was like, screw that narrative.
No.
Absolutely screw that narrative. This is, in my case, it's the last time that I'm going to be having a baby. And back to my perspective point, I always think, when I look back, when I'm probably in a nursing home knitting, what will I remember? Oh, coming back to work 6 months earlier and smashing targets and getting some extra commission checks versus taking that 12 months with my newborn baby. And so I made that wholehearted decision. BetterUp were fully supportive of that. Obviously, from a financial standpoint, parental leave benefits differ dramatically across businesses, industries, countries, all of that jazz. We could do a whole probably episode on all of that in its entirety. But I think from a sales perspective, the one thing that I really treasured and admired about BetterUp is that absolutely you also got your OTE. as part of your maternity leave pay.
That's brilliant.
And it was based on your past performance, so it still had a performance lens to it. You couldn't have just sold nothing in the last 12 months and then expect to get your full OTE on maternity leave. So it still had
Otherwise,
a performance.
We'd all be applying. We'd be like,
exactly. So it was based on your past performance, and that was then indicative of what OTE you would get as part of your maternity leave benefits. But
was it like 6 months past performance that they would take an average of?
I think it was the full year. If you've been there the full year, otherwise it would have been prorated. But yeah, I'd been there at this point two and a bit years.
That's
so
brilliant,
they looked at the
proved
past year.
it. And that's the thing that it really does frustrate me, is like, you have proved yourself as an employee.
Yeah.
You've worked hard. You've been successful.
Yeah.
Why should you not get rewarded with the full package that you would normally receive?
And salespeople, most of us, our earnings are 50, 60, 40. It's a big chunk if you have been a consistent performer and reliant on, we always overspend what we earn, and definitely Enrique and I are in that camp, Jesus. And so we've always overspent with the commissions, and it's just part of what we inherently deem as our income. So very grateful that was the structure that they had. But beyond policies, I think, yes, policies are important. Paternity, maternity pay, the time that you get, all of that is great. I think it's some of the more compassionate soft touches that are incredibly important when you're in that period of leave. So, keeping in touch days so that you've still got a bit of a sense check of the business. So it's not this shock to the, it is a shock to the system, do not get me wrong. And we can come on to that, but it's not as much of a shock to the system when you actually get back to work. And just those compassionate check-ins, particularly when you do go back in those first few months. I'm now month 4 back. So I'm sort of in my groove now, but those first couple of months, it's tough. And so the role of the manager, your line manager in this, is just the most critical person in that period. Like a compassionate daily check-in, really outlining what the plan is, a soft launch back into the business, those sorts of things. That's where the magic really happens to make someone feel valued back in the workplace.
I think so many businesses make the mistake of acting as if that employee doesn't work at the business anymore. They are still an employee. They still need to be brought into all of the business moves, things that are happening, so that they don't feel like they're playing catch up when they come back. As you said, there's so many other things that they need to be thinking about. It is going to be a shock, so just make it as easy as possible. So you spoke in this piece around 3 mindsets that have become your saving grace, which is perspective, patience, and prioritization, which I want to dig a bit deeper into. But you did mention that it was a shock coming back. So can you just walk us through how that felt, how you navigated that time coming back after that year off?
I think you have to be, I'll talk about impatience, but it's why patience is one of my 3 Ps. You have to be patient with yourself. You cannot expect your output to be the same as when you went on the parental leave. It's a muscle that you need to build back up. And so even the month before, I was so anxious. It was sleepless nights about going back to work. And, now I look back and be like, what were you so anxious about, Laura? But I had a real identity crisis. I was like, do I want this? Shall I just give up work and just be a stay-at-home mom? I keep dropping Rafa off to nursery. He's crying, and then the emotional mother in you comes out. You're like, am I doing the right thing? It's so many strong emotions are there in that, particularly that month before you start back at work. And having friends around you that have been in that same boat were my lifeline during that period, because they say, honestly, as soon as you get back in after month 1, you'll feel like you never left, and it'll be absolutely fine. And that was absolutely solid advice. But one thing a couple of tips I would say is preempt what you're going to need. So, with me being on maternity leave, I was taking care of the house. I was managing all of with Allegra, her nursery drop-offs, pickups, just managing the household, right? We knew as soon as I went back to work that was going to change. We preempted that and made sure that we put the right support structure around us. So we've got a part-time nanny that really helps us out with all of those things, like the kids washing and all. And of course, we're grateful that we're in a financial position to do that. But you've really got to preempt what your world is going to look like and what support structure you may need in order to thrive in both your parental role and your now professional role.
Still work even with support.
Totally.
You're not just like, here, I don't need to think about it. Switch off. As a mother as well, your instincts are 100% still with the kids.
Totally. But even honestly, like even just having the help to be able to like do the kids washing, and she picks them up from their both nurseries now, so that if we're stuck in London for whatever reason, we're not like stressing that we can't get back on the trains. And so that's really helped. And the other thing that I underestimated the impact of with me going back to work was the impact on Enrique, because I think he had got quite used to having me just take care of everything. And it was a shock to the system for that poor boy. He was like, okay, I need to step up now. Like, we need to share equal responsibilities, and we're having to diary plan in the week. And whereas before he didn't have to think. And so don't underestimate like the impact it can also have on the partner that hasn't had that extended period of leave, because for them, it'll be a shock to the system as well. So yeah, those are the two things. Make sure you've preempted the help, but also just be aware and conscious that your partner will also be going through a phase of adjustment.
Yeah. And you mentioned there patience being one of the things that you've really gained, and being a mother, patience with your kids. I'm sure you deal with World War III in your house every morning around the breakfast table, and then also coming into work and having battles to face with the industry, with your job, with your team. So how and what tactics have you used that people listening to this can take away from how you've just managed to see through it and actually just like prioritize what's important right now, because you've probably gained so many skills?
Yeah, I'd say patient takes on a whole new meaning in motherhood. I'm sure the fellow mothers and fathers can nod along in alignment there. But I think you're with kids, you've just named it, like you're dealing with morning tantrums. Like this morning, I needed to get both of them out the door so I could get the 8:17 train. Were they playing ball? No. Rafa then pooped himself just as we're leaving. All of that jazz. And so patience really does take on a whole new meaning. But what I think the skills that it has given me now back in the workplace is I'm just a much more composed version of myself. The things that, I would hold on to perfectionism, I can let that go now. Like there's a bigger picture here, and just being able to be more centered in the way that not everything is a catastrophe. I think sometimes at work it can feel like such a big deal, this XYZ thing. And particularly in sales, we know there's more heightened highs and lows of the sales roller coaster. But I think, when you're tested with patience in parenthood, it really does enable you to bring a more centered and calm approach, because the worst thing you can do is scream and shout back at your children. That is going to cause absolute havoc. So you have to learn that skill to really center yourself, calm yourself. I don't mind that you've just pooed and Allegra is just like screaming on the floor here because she wants chocolate buttons at 7 a.m. in the morning. It's like,
she's my girl.
Okay, kids, let's try and do some distraction tactics, shall we? But no, I think, so yes, like that has definitely helped me in the workplace environment to manage the stresses and highs and lows of sales in a more vigilant and composed manner, I would say.
Put your air hostess smiling face on. Don't let anybody know.
Yeah,
Do you know what annoys me so much is when businesses look at, and unfortunately we do still have this problem where they won't hire new mothers because they think, they're going to be distracted, their focus isn't going to be here on the business, it's going to be at home. And we could probably sit here and talk for hours about the skills that it's taught you, but I said at the beginning of this episode, mothers are superheroes because you have gained so many skills to be able to keep a human alive and doing your job. What would you say to businesses that are not hiring new mothers, and what skills have you now got aside from patience and persistence that you didn't have before?
Yeah, I think, it is very much like ruthless prioritization. Like some of the most productive people in the workplace, and Enrique and I chat about this all the time, are mothers or fathers. Because they have to distinguish between what's urgent and important. Not everything can be a burning fire that needs to be put out straight away. Like there's only so many hours out of the day, and what parenthood teaches you is to squeeze every last drop out of those hours in a really productive and efficient way. And I think that's the skill that in the world of work that we're at right now, change is constant. It's faster than ever. It is a big swirl out there. You know, there's not a big company under the sun that's not going through some form of transformation. And so I think what being a mother or father, parent teaches you is the ability to adapt, which is probably one of the sought after skills in the workplace right now. You know, with the advances in AI, we all have to adapt. Obviously to ruthless prioritization. And then, like I said, at the start, the other P that I have is this perspective. And it is around, what the perspective of, is what I'm doing right now delivering outsized value for the business? Or am I just doing busy work? Because because I don't have time now as a busy mum to be doing anything that's not contributing an outsized impact to BetterUp.
How does that look in your diary? Like, I'm sure it's changed. I'm sure you've deleted a ton of meetings that are just filler meetings that aren't necessary, that aren't going to move you forward in the business. Can you walk us through, like, do you have blocks where you're like, this is where I need to have my own focus time to get your work done, and then this is time that you can't disturb me because I might be with my kids? What does that look like? Yeah,
so I have a block in my diary every evening. Now, look, I work for a US company, and a lot of my team are US based. So I have adapted my diary to work with the context of the operating environment that I'm in. But, for example, the sort of 6:30 till 7:30 slot is a prime time when there's a ton of meetings going on in my business. I've blocked that out. And I was very bold and made my leader aware that I'm not going to be in those meetings, because that is the precious time for me to do bath time and bedtime and read my children's stories. And guess what? If I don't do that, what it means is the impact is that they won't go to sleep calmly and quietly. They're going to be causing havoc all evening, which means I can't then, and I don't do this every night, but I can't then get back online, at 7:30 to finish the day off. So there's an impact if I don't do it. And I think that's always important, is what's the impact if I don't do this to your business? But that's precious time for me. But also I'm able to, because, it is more US hour centric, I can have calmer mornings. So typically, I can do more of the nursery drop-offs, whereas Enrique does more of the pickups because he's more working in the UK hour context. So you just make it work, like somehow. And I remember being on mat leave going like, oh my God, how on earth is this going to work? Like, I just can't see how we're both going to be able to do these roles. It just works. It does just work. But yes, blocks in your calendar. I still have a bit of me time where I do my exercise in the mornings. That's typically like I'm a morning person. Again, it's quieter for me working at BetterUp typically in the mornings. And you're going to disappoint. I've already made my business aware there are going to be times where you want me to travel to the States and Enrique is with Microsoft in Seattle.
And you can't.
And I can't go. And I think that's, again, it's speak to fellow mothers that have been there before you, and what was their experience? Was the company accepting of that? Was there a rolling of the eye? Did they accommodate it by allowing you to dial in virtually? Did they record the meetings? Those sorts of things. Like, ask around you and just ask what people's other experiences were.
My boss Jack said to me recently, because I've started using the word I worry, or like I fear that, and he was like, stop saying I worry. You can feel that, but there's always a solution to everything. And I think this rings true completely to what you're saying. You're going to have to adapt. You're going to have to change things. You are going to work differently now than you worked before you had kids.
Totally.
And your business is going to have to adapt with that. But it's just about that communication and how you can work together to be able to make something that's going to drive the most effective outcome for both of you. And with that communication, I think it's really important to communicate with your business about the patience piece. And I want to ask you, how have you, or maybe you didn't have to, and BetterUp were incredible, but you've got a newfound patience and prioritization, but maybe businesses don't feel that themselves. They think, oh, Laura's back after a year. We're so excited. Day one, we're going to put her in all the meetings. Her target's up. She's got all these people now to manage, and she's just go. And it's this balance of like, you need to kind of be trickled back in stages.
Yeah. Well, I think there's two things here. So I actually I mentored a lady over the summer that was sort of, navigating a new job search. She was on maternity and trying to find a new role whilst on maternity. And I think also with that there is a more of a trend that we're seeing and you guys will know this better than I, given what you guys do, but there seems to be more of a trend of employers wanting people back in the office as well. And if it's hybrid, it might be like you need to be in these set 3 days. And unfortunately with kids, sometimes that isn't feasible. And so I coached this lady in saying, right, she got offered the role. And I said, before you take it, just write down, like, this is your operating principles, almost like your run of show, if you like, for the week. And just make sure you're aligned on that with your leader, your hiring manager, because what you don't want is to get lured in with this enthusiasm, and that could be joining a new company or it could be returning to your business, but they've changed over the course that you've been away, and no longer is it the COVID work from home and now it's all in the office. Just make sure that your operating principles and the way that you want to work does actually align with theirs now. So as simple as, these are the days and the hours that I can commit to. This is my time when I need to be with the kids. I want to make you aware in terms of some travel challenges that there could be with, just make them aware of your operating manual as a family, and they can then take it or leave it, and you can take it or leave it, but at least you've been fully transparent. And so, as part of my return to work, my leader, we'd built up trust, right? I'd been with that. He'd been my leader he employed me when I first started BetterUp, and is still my leader today. So, there's an inherent trust there already that comes with that, which makes it easier. But I made him aware of some things and principles and travel conflicts that we might come into. And it just having that conversation put me so at ease that even if I do disappoint, it's not going to be detrimental to my career growth here.
Yeah.
And I genuinely believe those employers that embrace, hiring, developing, investing in those mothers and fathers that are returning from a period of parenthood have got the potential to unlock so much growth for the business, because they do have a greater perspective. They're not going to try and put out every fire. They're going to look at things from a step back and look at the bigger picture viewpoint. So that's the perspective. They're going to have ruthless prioritization because they have to. So they're only going to work on the things that are going to deliver outsized impact. And lastly, in terms of their managerial skills and just their way of being, they're going to have that patience, because nothing demands patience than children. So employees, you can suddenly have a whole new world of calmness for. So yeah, that would be my viewpoint.
You're really selling motherhood to me.
There's also carnage behind the scenes, but yes.
There's happy days, but there's also stress.
Yeah.
You mentioned their prioritization, and we touched on working on things that are going to move the needle. And when we're talking about high performance with ICs, but also leaders, focusing on things that are going to hit your target, move you towards that goal, instead of just doing the quick ticks and the quick wins. Yeah. So it must be really difficult for you when you kind of feel like I'm sure you've had this sense of feeling like control is leaving you and it's running away from you because you have so many things on your plate to manage. So how do you bring that control back in your day-to-day?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think from a work context, obviously specific to sales leadership, it's what are the metrics that matter? Are we just measuring things that actually don't? And believe me, I've been there. So I'm not saying I'm perfect in this, but are we measuring things that actually don't correlate to revenue? So have we really defined what are the metrics in our business that we know correlate to sales? And let's focus on those inputs and measuring those things rather than all the other stuff, if you like. So I'll give you a good example at BetterUp. Yes, we could, if we wanted to, measure every single meeting that happens. We know that doesn't necessarily correlate. Volume of meetings does not necessarily correlate to close one business. What we know is the metric that matters is how many of those meetings are with, in our case, CHROs, Chief Talent Officers, CEOs. Those are the meetings that correlate in the most efficient and effective manner to sales. And so we measure that. So from a team perspective, I don't care if they're having 10 meetings a week. What I care about, are they having X amount of meetings a week with C-level? So this is what I mean about like just really focusing and lasering in on the things that are really important that will deliver that outsized impact. Then from a personal perspective, I think it's just what can you cut out? Like that's what Enrique and I had to have some sort of pretty, not hard conversations with each other because we were both in alignment, but they're tough conversations. It's like, okay, we're both back in pretty busy full-time jobs, you know, and I'm not taking reduced hours or anything like that. We're both full-time Monday to Friday jobs. What can give, and what are we willing to give up?
Champagne on Mondays, unfortunately,
did have to go. You know, champagne Sundays is now the thing. Now it's
you've got that now.
Oh no, we've got that now.
Good,
yeah, champagne Mondays converted into champagne Sundays whilst we're cooking the roast dinner. Lovely. But in all, like, jokes aside, it was things like, we adore our friendship group. Of course we do. But right now, the most important thing for us as a family and to keep us like sane is quiet weekends. And so we've made a promise to each other that weekends are us time. And yes, every now and then, of course, it might be we've got a wedding here or there's some really special friends that we want to spend time with, but we've really minimized the amount of like social engagement that we do. And that might sound really harsh, but it's the only thing that unites us as a family, where we can have quality, quiet time at the weekend. My best weekends are when I can be in my PJs all weekend and not have to see anyone or do anything. And I say that because in sales as well, we're constantly on, right? We're constantly like on, engaging, like this meeting, that meeting, you know what it's like. And so there's nothing better than, for me, and Enrique's the same, having a weekend where it's like, okay, we're just going to slum on the sofa and see no one and barely even talk to each other. We'll just watch Peppa Pig, you know?
Yeah. Begrudgingly. Laura, to finish up this conversation, I know we touched a lot on what workplace can do to support, but you wrote in this piece, it's not just about offering policies, it's about fostering a culture where new parents feel supported, seen and valued. It means creating an environment where parents don't feel the need to apologise for their dual responsibilities or hide the challenges that they face, which I think was such a brilliant point. Could we just end on how much contact time do you think that you need with your manager when returning? Is there anything that you wish that you would have had a bit more support on for those compassionate check-ins to make sure that you are coming back to the business, you are also feeling seen, valued and supported? Because I'm sure there's so many, also I've heard women that are recent mothers, they have so much imposter syndrome when coming back as well.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think for me, what I would do now, if there's someone in my team that's coming back off of maternity, it's daily check-ins. Because in that first week, for sure, because that first week is so hard, because the business has changed, people have moved on, the social connections that you've had have also moved on, right? And you're sort of trying to navigate yourself back in a business where you're known, but you're also not known anymore. And so I think the role of a manager in that first week is to really comfort you and onboard you back into the business. There should be, and I wish, BetterUp don't have this, maybe other companies do out there, but I wish there was almost like a return to work onboarding plan, because we put a lot of effort into how we do that for new joiners and in a very thoughtful way. But when you're away for a year from a business, you are essentially a new joiner again. Yes, you've got a bit of inherent knowledge about the offering and what you're selling, but you are essentially, particularly in high growth companies, it's basically like being a new joiner again. So I think daily check-ins on that first week back are really important. If distance, location allows for it, obviously the more that you can do in person, the better. I was fortunate that I actually attended, I joined back in the November, and I think it was 2 weeks in, I went over to Austin for our QBRs. And so that was a really great social connectivity point for me. And that really helped. But I also would say during the maternity leave, for those that work for maybe US centric, more in the startup space, what shocked me is that there is a real cultural difference of how maternity leave is treated from an employer standpoint. And this is not out of ill intent. it's purely that in the US, what I learned was when people are on maternity leave, it's almost like a golden rule that you do not get in touch with them.
Really?
Like that is their precious time and you do not get in touch as the employer. And that's driven from mostly because most parental leaves in the US are obviously super short. You know, I mean, you hear the horror stories. It's something like people get more time, a puppy gets more time with their mother before you can actually take the puppy home yourself than a new mum gets with their baby in most of corporate America, which is wild. So it stemmed from that because they do have much shorter periods, but that then can infiltrate. If you're working for a European business, but it's US HQ'd, the cultural norms can be quite different. And so I actually had to say to our sort of GM of Europe and my leader who's based in the States, like, no, please get in touch with me. Like, oh, we didn't think we were allowed. We didn't want to disturb you. I'm like, no, you're like, please talk to me. Exactly. At first I was like, why are they not talking to me?
Yeah.
But once I guess both light bulbs went off in all of our heads, we realized, okay, this is a cultural difference. So just be aware of that. It might not be that they're ignoring you out of ill intent. Like that wasn't the case in my, that is not the norm as to how they do things. So
bless them. Communication. That's
communication
the main thing.
Yeah.
Laura, thank you so much. This has been so insightful. But as we end every episode on Sales Unfiltered, what is one challenge that you faced in your career or life that's really shaped you to where you are today?
Oh, good one. So for those that don't know, so I took a very unconventional route into the world of technology sales. I was a professional dancer beforehand.
Amazing.
And so I think ballet, yeah. So quite literally plie to pitching. So I think for me, it's been the power of rejection. Because in the dance world, it is freaking harsh rejection. You know, you're there with your number on your leotard and you're being told you're too fat, you're too thin, your legs aren't flexible enough, you don't look pretty enough, you're not this, you're not that. You know, it's quite personal rejection.
It is really you are not right.
It's brutal rejection.
Awful.
And, you know, I had that from the age of like when I was competitively dancing from like the age of 7, right?
Wow.
And then obviously took that professionally. And so I've got my superpower, you know, when people always ask in like interview questions, what's your superpower and what's your Achilles heel? My superpower is that I can handle rejection really well. I can bounce back really well. And so what does that mean in terms of a mindset is that I've got really good resilience. And so I think whilst, yes, that's a challenge. And, you know, I think that's why sales has always suited me, because in sales, you know, you can be the best salesperson in the world, but I'm sorry, at some point you've always been told no, or you've had rejection, or you've been hung up on if you're an SDR or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And the best salespeople, I think, have the ability to bounce back quickly and see the positive, glass half full. I think to be a great salesperson, you have to be glass half full. And so, yeah, I think it's the biggest challenge I've had in my life has been a ton of rejection, for sure. You know, even trying to get into tech sales at the time, you know, you don't have a university degree. And it was the time where, you know, it was still very like, okay, have you got the 2-1 degree? And I was like, no, I've been a dancer. And I didn't have any skills that you would need to be a salesperson at that particular time.
But thank God that employee looked past that lack of degree and gone, actually, Laura can bring so much.
I might have told a little white lie at the time.
Okay, well, we'll brush over that.
yeah. Degree, I've got a master's in dance.
Yes.
But I am masterful at dance. So
well,
there we go.
You
know, it's all about spinning the lines, walking that tightrope of sales truth, shall we say. But no, I think, you know, the ability, rejection drives bounce back, which drives resilience. And I think that's been one of my greatest assets in my sales career.
I feel like this way of not dealing with rejection in a bad way stands good to you when your toddlers grow up, because they won't want to cuddle you probably, and you'll feel like it's okay, I'm being rejected.
I know.
I have thick skin, as you said in your blog. They won't want cuddles all the time, 24/7.
Do you know what? That is going to be the real test. That's a very good one, Izzy. I hadn't thought about that, because there's the rejection of my children no longer wanting cuddles in bed with me, but there's also like, what about when they get rejection? Like, I wonder how I'm going to handle that, because so much of like my my being and my enjoyment and like life purpose now is filtered through them.
Oh, yeah.
So what about when Rafa doesn't get into the football team? Like,
I feel like you're going to be fiercely protective.
I know.
Of him.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting dynamic. But,
watch out. Laura's on her way to the football field to make sure that coach gives him a spot on the team.
Yes,
I can't wait to hear about it. Laura, thank you so much for coming in. I've learned so much, and I'm so excited to see how you get on.
Oh,
and
thank you so
the
much
fact
for
that you don't
having
have
me.
any more kids will keep you to that.
Yes. No more children. We're a busy enough household it is. But
You've got enough on your plate.
Thank you for having this conversation.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Sales Unfiltered. If you enjoyed this conversation, I would love for you to hit the subscribe button. And if you're feeling extra generous, leave us a quick review. See you next week.